The views and opinions expressed on the Veterans in Politics radio show and podcast are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of Vegas AllNet Radio, its affiliates, or its parent company.
Good afternoon, folks. We are back with another episode of Veterans in Politics. We have a very exciting show for you today. We have Dwight Jones, who is the Clark County School District Superintendent. And then our second guest today will be Dawn Gibbons, former First Lady of Nevada. So this should be a very exciting show. Got a lot of questions I would like to, and I'm sure Steve does as well, ask the superintendent about what his plans are to fix the Clark County School District, which, to be blunt, has a lot of issues. Not necessarily saying that it's their fault, but what I would like to talk about is, personally, I really don't care who wins this PR battle, because unfortunately that's what it's become. It's become a battle between certain individuals in the legislature saying that the Clark County School District is just not willing to make the cuts necessary in order to make the school district work correctly. And then the school district, on the other hand, they're the ones that blame the legislature, saying that the legislature's asking them to cut too much. Basically, the ones that are getting hosed here, guys, it's the kids. And when the kids get hosed, we all do, because we're going to pay for it one way or the other. Okay, if you have an uneducated workforce, number one, you pay for it. When Caroline Edwards was here, the president of the Clark County School District, we had a very interesting conversation about what do we pay for and when do we pay for it. If kids are not educated, they don't become productive members of society. So for all the individuals out there that are concerned about, hey, we can't raise taxes, or we can't do this, or we can't do that right now because it'd be bad for the economy, I need you guys to look at it from another perspective. One way or another, we're all going to pay. We will see increased taxes. Increased taxes may come through different fees or fines that they cover up as not being actual taxes. To build new prisons, to pay for these kids when they're not educated, and then they decide to make money other ways, okay? And then decreased government services will eventually occur, because the argument always is and has been lately on the right that, you know what, we need to bring in more revenue in the state of Nevada, and that doesn't happen by raising taxes. The way that works is we bring new business to Nevada, and these businesses open, they hire people, we put more people to work, we don't have to raise taxes, now revenues go up. Well, how's that going to happen when you have companies that are unwilling to move to the state of Nevada, not necessarily because it's a business-unfriendly environment? We have no corporate income tax in the state of Nevada. So companies that try to open here, yes, maybe they do have too many loopholes that they got to jump through in order to start up their companies, but it's nothing compared to most states. The reason why most companies do not move here, especially high-tech companies in particular, is because we do not have an educated work pool to pull from. So whether it's the Clark County School District's fault or whether it's the legislator's fault, it doesn't matter to me. It's all become a PR campaign, and it's not fair. It's not fair to kids. And it's not fair morally, because it's all of our duties, whether we have kids in the school district or we don't, because me personally, I don't have any children. But if kids are not educated, then this generation will not have a life better than we have. That's the American way. It's always been that way. We have a better life than our parents did. And the reason why is because our parents worked really hard to make sure that happened. So it's incumbent upon all of us to put aside all political differences and basically just say, look, we need to fix this one way or the other. Let's be grown-ups about this. So one of the things that a few of the ideas that I have for the superintendent, and he'll be in shortly, and I want to ask him and get his views on, that I think would help a lot and allow the debate to begin is for the school district to actually make some real fundamental changes. Then they can take that to the legislature, and the legislature, now the ball's in their court. Because right now the Clark County School District is refusing to make any changes, or they say they are, but they're not really. They're not willing to meet the legislature halfway. So first thing that needs to happen, in my opinion, we need to get rid of the LIFO thing. Last in, first out. I don't care if a teacher's been there 1 year and another teacher's been there 20 years. If the teacher's been there 1 year, is producing results, and the one that's been there 20 years hasn't, well, then that teacher that's been there 20 years just needs to go. Period. Get rid of tenure, or at least make it performance-based, and then make administrative pay in the Clark County School District based on teacher performance. And I'll ask the superintendent more about that. But it's my belief that the fish always stinks from the head to the tail. So if the head stinks, the tail's going to stink. So let's stop blaming the teachers all the time, and let's start looking at the administrative end. Let's look at that first, and then go from there. Once you do that, you make those fundamental changes. Now you can go back to the legislature and say, hey, you know what? You wanted us to make changes. We did. The ball's in your court. Now where's the money? Hey, Steve, how you doing?
I'm good. All right, let's get to our guests. And the two guests we're going to have today, the first guest is going to be Dwight Jones, Clark County School Superintendent. And then we're going to have Dawn Gibbons, former Nevada Assemblywoman and former First Lady. We're going to take a commercial break, and we'll be right back. This is Steve Sanson, Jim Jonas for Veterans in Politics.
This public service announcement is brought to you by Veterans in Politics International. The Veterans in Politics mission is to teach, educate, organize, and awaken our veterans and their families to select, support, and vote intelligently for a better world, and to protect ourselves from our own governments and a culture of corruption, and to be the political voice for those in other groups that do not have one.
There are too many homeless veterans, and more help is needed from the VA. Every veteran service organization post should adopt a local homeless veteran.
The funding of VA medical centers is inadequate, and building a VA hospital in southern Nevada is moving at a slow pace. The budget has been flatlined for too many years. The VA is too quick to deny claims and too slow to help veterans gather records in support of claims.
Local politicians ignore veterans and their issues. They perceive a lack of organization among their local veterans, and that it won't hurt them at election time. Veterans too often vote party, not veteran issues. All veterans should vote in every election.
The news media give inadequate coverage to veteran issues and events. You must send letters to the editor and voice this concern.
Please contact your members of Congress and Senate and urge them to co-sponsor key legislation in supporting our veterans.
Please support Veterans in Politics. And to get more information, go to www.veteransinpolitics.com.
Hey, listen up. If you're a military veteran, if you're related to a veteran, or if you know a veteran, you'll enjoy the Veterans Reporter radio show every Thursday from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. with me. I'm your host, Chuck N. Baker. Every week, we will explore veterans' issues, and we'll have guests who will talk about topics of interest to and about the veterans community. And if you don't listen, you'll have to give me 20 push-ups.
Americans have been fooled by politicians about illegal immigration. They make you think that if you bring up this topic, you are a racist. Did you know that America is the only country on this planet that does not enforce its federal immigration laws? For the fear of being called a racist, I am for legal immigration. I was born on the island of Jamaica, became an American citizen, served 12 years in the U.S. military, served in Desert Storm, and received a Presidential Unit Citation, National Defense Medal, and Marine Corps Commendation. Our immigrants serve a purpose. I understand that this country was founded on immigration, but there is a wrong way and a right way. I'm here to tell you that illegal immigration is breaking our federal laws. Why don't you call me a racist? This is Steve Sanson.
Well, we're back. This is Steve Sanson, Jim Jonas of Veterans in Politics. Live in studio, we have Dwight Jones, the Clark County School Superintendent. Superintendent, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very well. Nice to be here with you.
Likewise. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm originally from Kansas. Was born in western Kansas and have been doing most of my education work in Kansas and Colorado. I've been an elementary, middle, and high school principal. I've been a teacher at elementary and middle school level. I've been an assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction. Worked for a private manager of schools called Edison Learning. I've been the Commissioner of Education for the state of Colorado, and really happy to be here in Las Vegas or Clark County as the Superintendent of Schools.
So why did you, I would say, file for this position of Clark County School Superintendent?
Yeah, it was like filing. It was a pretty tough process, the whole aspect of applying. As the commissioner in Colorado, we pushed a lot of education reforms. I was the commissioner for the state for 3.5 years, and we looked at teacher tenure and evaluation. We looked at how we change accountability in the system and hold ourselves more accountable. We looked at innovation and can you create more choice options for parents and things like that. So it's one thing to pass legislation, it's another thing to implement it. And so we passed legislation in Colorado. I didn't want to be one of those that pass it and then say, how'd that work out for you? I wanted to actually go out in the field and see if we could implement what we passed.
Right. But between Colorado and Las Vegas is a big difference, but why did you want to become the superintendent here?
Yeah, well, when the position came open, when the folks that were running search contacted me, I really didn't have an interest. And then I had a chance to look at some data and get to know some of the folks that were concerned about education in Clark County. I started looking at the data and saw how nationally the school district ranked as one of the worst. The dropout rate was one of the highest. The graduation rate was one of the lowest. And, I got pretty attracted to that challenge, to see if we can make things better for all kids. In the school district, we've been talking about being ready by exit, meaning that all kids should exit their, when they graduate, that they ought to be ready, either ready to go into the workforce, ready to go into the service of their country, or ready to go into something post-secondary. And we've got far too many graduates that are graduating from our high schools that still need remediation. And I just think after taxpayers pay our salaries that there ought to be a better result. And we think Clark County can yield a better result, and that's what we've been working on.
So Superintendent, first of all, I want to thank you for coming on the show, and I also want to say that you have a very daunting task ahead of you, so to speak, which I'm sure you already well know. One of the things that I was talking about in the introduction to the show is that I'm not really so concerned about. It just seems to me that lately. And by lately I mean about the last 5 years, it seems like it comes up every legislative session, that it becomes almost a PR battle, so to speak. It's like the legislature, certain groups inside the legislature saying, hey, you know what, the Clark County School District is just not willing to make the necessary cuts. They could actually perform at a higher level with less money if they really wanted to. And then the school district always seems to push back on the legislature and say, you know what, we can't make these cuts, and this is the reason why our education system is failing. So how many, during this legislative process, did you have an opportunity to meet with some of these legislators and Governor Gibbons and explain some of your concerns to him?
Yeah, Jim, I did have an opportunity to spend some time in Carson City, met with a lot of the legislators on both sides of the aisle. Also spent some time with the governor. The governor, as you know, has been pushing some education reforms that align pretty well to some of the work we had done in Colorado, as well as some of the things we hope to do here in Clark County. But funding was a big issue, and as you probably were monitoring the initial cuts that they were asking the school district to make, $400 million, which would be about 20% of the overall budget. It's a $2.1 billion budget. That's too much. So as we met with legislators, the whole community is hurting, so we knew we had to do our part. I mean, everybody's going to have to make some sacrifice. But I think the sacrifice they were asking the school district to make before the budget got better was too great. I think it was going to be too devastating. When we were going to be potentially laying off 3,000 to 5,000 employees, with the majority of those being teachers, then you can see that that was going to have a devastating effect, especially if you think about the average secondary class size in the Clark County School District is 33 students. Nationally, the average class size is somewhere in the mid-20s, so you can see that it was going to have a devastating effect. So right now, we're facing about a $150 million shortfall. I mean, it's hard to talk about $150 million and actually be happy that that's all we have to cut, but when we were looking at $400 million, it was going to be too devastating.
So when you talk about having to address the layoff issue or possible layoffs, one of the things that I find interesting is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that right now the Clark County School District has in place what they call a LIFO system. So it's the last person hired is the first person that would get laid off. How do you feel about that? Because me personally, I think that, if a teacher has only been there 1 year but they're producing results, and someone's been there 20 years and they're not producing results, then unfortunately I think the 20-year, because it's affecting the kids more at the teacher level, I think the 20-year-old teacher that's been teaching for 20 years, actually not 20 years old, but has been teaching 20 years, should be the one to let go. Is there any way what's your feelings on that, and is there any way we could change that?
Yeah, Jim, it actually did get changed somewhat. The legislature did pass legislation that addressed what is called RIF, reduction in force.
Right.
Before, what was in our negotiated agreement, as well as what was supported by statute, said that kind of first in or last in, first out. It was just based on seniority. And now, though we still have to negotiate it, and negotiations have just started with our bargaining groups, but you can look at other criteria to take into consideration. For example, poor performance. For example, if employees have been written up or have other kinds of violations that you can take into consideration. Maybe employees that we wouldn't think are doing the best job and that we might not think would be the best to be around our children, that you can consider if you have to do a reduction in force, you can consider some other criteria other than just seniority. Now, I do want to make sure I state that I think experience does matter, and so we still ought to consider seniority because in many cases our experienced teachers are doing a great job. But we do have some teachers that have been teaching a long time that have gotten burnout and are not getting the kind of results that kids deserve. We've got far too many kids that can't read, write, do math and science at grade level or above. So I think we have to address that in a variety of ways.
Superintendent, is it true, because I received several emails before you came on the show, and a lot of people complained that principals have too many administrators. They have too many secretaries working for them. They have too many principals. They have too many deans, but not enough teachers. So they're top heavy in administrative and staff, but they're short of the actual teachers in the classroom. Is there a way that we could start cutting the administrators, take a look at principals that have 4 secretaries or 3 secretaries, especially being in the technology world we are in today? And do we really need a dean for every single grade level? Do we really need a assistant principal for every single grade level? I mean, we got one superintendent that takes care of the whole of Clark County, which is the 5th largest school district in the nation. So why does one principal need so many administrators to help them out, especially being in the technology world we are in today?
Yeah, Steve, that's a really good question, and I appreciate you asking it. I've not heard so much, discontent with the actual building-based administration. I've heard more about the central office, that they feel like we're heavy in the central office, that when you think about at the building base or the school base, that it really is one principal. In our largest high schools, we have about 3 assistants and 2 deans. I would just say we don't have a dean for every grade. We don't have an assistant principal for every grade. I do think building level support, that's where the action takes place, that we ought to make sure that we're staffed and staffed well, whether it's at the administrative level, whether it's at the teaching level, or even, custodians that are taking care of the building. And I do support making sure we have the right kind of clerical support. But where we've kind of focused our attention is more at the central office level. I do think when, you mentioned, Steve, that district is the 5th largest school district in the country. That is correct. And it grew really fast. This school district was also the fastest growing school district over the last 4 or 5 years, even though it certainly has slowed now. And when you're doing that growth, I think the district really ratcheted up, to build enough buildings, staff those buildings, all the things that have to happen to open schools. And they were opening 4 to 5 to 6 schools every year. But now that growth has stopped. And so I do think we have to go in at the central office level and address the number of staff that we've had to ratchet up to deal with that growth. And now that the growth has stopped, we ought to ratchet back down. And what happens, systems, is most of the time they never ratchet back down.
Right.
So we did cut 20% at the central office level. Even though some of the budget's gotten restored, I've maintained that 20% central office level, which will be administrators, secretaries, other central office positions, to start to downsize that. Now, nowhere in the country has any school district that I'm aware of, at least, cut 20% in 1 year's time. So I think we are addressing some of the concerns that are coming in. And I'm trying to say we've got to get more resources to the school level, and we need more teachers, and in some cases we even need more administrative support at the school level. But certainly at the central office level, we've been making a lot of adjustments.
So, Superintendent, one of the things that I've always found, because former State Senator Bob Beers talks to me a lot about education, or used to talk to me a lot about education, and that was always his big complaint, that they're top heavy in the central office. And that just comes to a central point about any government program in general. You have to expand. When we were expanding, you had to just expand like crazy. And now the whole downsizing thing. Well, it's great to cut 20%, but unfortunately when you're cutting 20%, you're putting those people out of work. Is there any program that you've been able to, has anyone ever brought up the idea of maybe working with the teachers' unions of saying, we don't necessarily need to get rid of these administrators in the central office, but move them back to the building base?
Well, what happens is there's only so many positions, so when you cut and positions are already filled, there's really no place for those folks to land. So that gets back to, Jim, what we were talking about earlier, the reduction in force, where seniority was the rule of the day, meaning that when you would cut someone at an upper level, they would actually bounce back to a lower level, but that would end up sending somebody out at the lowest level. Okay. So if you were a first or second year employee in the district, that's who ultimately was losing their job. But when we have a $2.1 billion budget and about 90% of our budget is people, you can see that when we start making large budget cuts, there's no other way around it that at some point we're either going to have concessions, meaning that everybody's going to have to take a little less or take furlough days or do something to help offset the amount of costs that goes into just, payroll and all the things that happen in district, or we're going to have a reduction in force. And right now we've had a reduction in force, and we still may have another. As I said earlier, we still have $150 million to make up in the budget. We're required by law to have a balanced budget, and we're going to have that. We've got negotiations going on right now where we're working with our employee groups to see if there is a willingness to take some concessions to help save jobs. I've asked the different employee groups for approximately $55 million of the $150 million in concessions. And then the 20% cut, we've done rerouting of buses to save about $10 million, and there's other positions that we've had to cut to help balance the budget.
How have supportive or unsupportive have, one of the things that, and I really want your input on this, I've always thought would be really super difficult to be a superintendent would be, amongst all the other things you got to deal with, balancing the legislators and all that good fun stuff. What's the strength of the teachers union here in Nevada? Because I've actually heard a counter argument, because I'm not an anti-union guy, so to speak, but I'm not necessarily a pro-union guy. Sometimes I think that the unions hold companies and government agencies a little too much feet to the fire, so to speak, and they're getting a little bit more than they really should. But someone pushed back on me, and they said, actually, the biggest problem in the state of Nevada is that the teachers union is not strong enough. So the teachers don't actually have enough leverage to push back against the administrative side of it. What's your take on that?
Well, Jim, sitting in that seat, they seem pretty strong to me. I certainly don't mind going to the table and bargaining. You know, I think there's a place for collective bargaining. I think if we both sit down in good faith and, you know, try to work out issues, I want to make sure teachers are supported. But I always remind the public, but teachers actually are our employees. They're not the employees of the union. They certainly are supported by the union. And my objective is to take care of the teachers and the other employees. But my number one objective is to take care of the children. I remind folks we're not an employment agency. We're actually educators. And our key function is making sure the kids are educated. And right now, we've got a lot of work to do. And I know I need the employees to get that done. And so we have started. And as you can imagine, when you're facing potential layoffs and other kind of cuts, that's difficult bargaining. And so it's been difficult. But I think, we have a good relationship with our bargaining groups. And after we make difficult decisions and we might agree to disagree, I think we'll have good relationships coming out of this process as well. At least I sure plan to on our end.
What do you say to the individuals that are out there that just say, you know what, government run education in general is just a bad idea. This is just another part of it. You know, we try to expand when we had to expand, and now we're having all these issues cutting back when we have to cut back because of bargaining groups and other things. And say that this is the perfect time to let's go straight to a voucher program. Let's do away with federalized, state-run, county-run education in general, and let's privatize the whole system.
Yeah, the first, I certainly want to go on record. I'm a strong supporter of the public school system. I have come out of the public school system, and though every one of my teachers may not have been the best teacher I could have had, I think I got a good education. I think making sure that an education is a viable option for every youngster. What's great about this country is that in our public school system, we educate every kid, regardless of handicapping condition, regardless of socioeconomic, regardless of race, regardless of language. There are some of the countries that the United States get compared to actually don't educate all the kids. They sort and select. And it's in this country where it's the land of the free, where everybody has the opportunity for the American dream, I think a strong public education system is necessary to us just maintaining our way of life and supporting our Constitution. And if you tried to privatize it, where would you come up with? There wouldn't even be that many schools. How could you even create that system? Now, I am a strong supporter of choice. I think the status quo that has happened in so many of our public school system across the country has to be pushed up against. That's why I've been supportive of choice options and charter schools, because I think that's a nice parent choice that applies pressure to, if any agency just has state blanche total control, I don't think it's good. And I think what happens is when parents start to get choice, it puts pressure on the regular traditional schools to actually get better, as some of the charter schools have gotten better. But what we have found over time, and the charter schools have found, that this business of educating all of the children, regardless of where they start or their conditions they come from, is a tough business.
It's a tough business,
and so we all have had some successes and some failures, whether they've been charter schools or public schools. But I'm a strong supporter of the public school system. And to have, I think, a country like ours where we absolutely afford, it's a right to get an education, I think that's what makes our country work.
Superintendent, I want to talk about teachers' pay.
Okay.
According to national average, the Clark County school teachers here are one of the lowest paid in the nation. What are you going to do about that? I mean, how are you going to attract people to want to be teachers here in Clark County if the pay is just ridiculously low?
Yeah, Steve, boy, your questions have been right on. Those are all challenges that we're facing, and pretty hard to really look at raising teacher pay right now in the economy we're in. And when you think about that, the state of Nevada continues to lead the country in people that are out of work. The state of Nevada continues to lead the country in foreclosures, and we may not even know how many folks have stopped paying their mortgages right now. So, and we're facing right now, we're facing right now in the school district a deficit of $150 million. So, even though the teacher pay is not at the top of the list, I think we do have a fairly competitive pay. We've not had a difficult time right now attracting professionals to the Clark County School District because the whole country is facing a recession, and so there's been a number of folks out of work. Now, over time, Steve, I do think we need to address it. Yes, absolutely.
The difference is about $10,000 a year.
In some places.
Yes.
Now, if you look at our average teaching salary being right around $70,000, actually, I think most people probably listening in would not say that's probably a low salary. But when you look at the entry-level pay and that competitive, so I think you have to look at the whole spectrum. So in some parts of our pay structure and with some of our employees with experience, we actually are very competitive. Okay. I think we've got to get more competitive on the entry level, and again, it's pretty hard to do right now. We don't have the resources. Our resources actually come directly from the taxpayers of the community, and right now I think the taxpayers are pretty strapped.
Superintendent, I got one last question. Honestly, Steve, this is
I'm going to cut Jim's
question.
mic off.
This is Steve always pushes back on me. He's like, Jim, you say one last question about 15 times a show, but this is one last.
Remember, Steve is a Marine.
Oh, I know. Have you had the conversation, because I have a lot of relatives that were teachers and that are currently teachers, and I've heard this from parents as well. Superintendent, have you had this conversation with any of the teachers that you know, being a former teacher yourself? And Steve brought up a good point about pay. But one of the things that I always bring up when teachers complain about not making enough money, it's not so much they have a pretty good pension package. Their health care benefits aren't all that bad either. It's, did you get into this profession because you thought you were going to make a lot of money? Or did you get into this profession because of the fact that, do you realize the impact that you can have on someone's life? When I was in 4th grade, I absolutely hated school. I will never forget Mrs. Cooper, my 4th grade teacher. To this day, we still stay in contact. From 4th grade on, I wasn't a straight A student by any means, but I got A's and B's. I graduated high school, and I have 2 college degrees today. And I still, to this day, give her the credit for that because she inspired me to get myself educated. And I guarantee she was making less than my dad was at the time as a construction worker. Have you had that conversation with any of the teachers that, like, it's not so much about the money, you got to look at the impact, the sociology impact that you're going to have on these young people's lives? Have you had the chance to have that conversation with either a teacher or the teachers union?
I can tell you, Jim, we've had that conversation over and over, and this community is very blessed that the majority of teachers in this community have picked this as a profession for the very reason that you described, that they really do want to make a difference. It's like mission work, and they really are committed to the young people to help them read. And if you haven't been in a classroom with 30 kids on all kind of levels with special needs they bring into the classroom, it's a really tough job. So I'm a huge teacher supporter. I want to go back to what Steve said, is even though our resources are tight, I think we ought to be investing in our teachers. Most teachers did not get into it for the pay, but I think as hard as they work, some people think their job ends once school gets out, and actually it doesn't. They're following up with parents, they're tutoring after school, they're grading papers, and so I certainly want us to continue to work to make sure that even though you may have gotten into it to make a difference, and that is mission work, that you still ought to have a good, viable salary. Now, I agree that the benefit package is really good in this district. Actually, one of the better benefit packages, I think, in a lot of districts, especially districts this size.
I've seen the benefit package.
Yeah, but the salary piece is an issue. But we can still invest in teachers. I'm trying to invest in their training, make sure we support them, make sure they have fair evaluations, make sure they're getting the right kind of feedback. So there's a lot without just improving the salary, because I don't have the resources to do that, but I've got different funding that can be used to support teachers in other ways, and we plan to do that over this upcoming school year.
How about parental involvement? Because that's lacking here in Clark County. There's a lot of parents that deem teachers as babysitters. I mean, you go there for 6 hours and watch their kids, and they come back home, and parents are not involved in the kids' academics, or not involved in the kids' whereabouts or anything like that. How do you plan to implement a program as far as getting parents involved in the school and in their own children's lives?
Yeah, it's a real issue for us. I have not only heard about, but certainly can see that parental involvement has been a big issue. Even parents raising the bar to expect a lot more out of the system. If you think about how the system is performing, I'm surprised that parents aren't really pushing back to say we've got to get better results. We're spending taxpayer money. What do the results look like? But at the same time, we've got to get parents to get more engaged, to not attack their teachers, but partner with their teachers. This business is a hard business. Kids come with more challenges than ever before. Parental involvement is a real issue. I hear it across the community. It doesn't matter which business groups or other kind of groups I talk to, parental involvement always becomes an issue. Now, what are we doing about it? We are working hard to implement a growth model system where parents will be able to see the academic achievement of their kids over time. I think empowering parents with more information is going to be beneficial to get more parents involved and easy to understand, not this education jargon, that most people can't even say, what does that even mean? But in terms that average parents can say, I get this. I understand that my kid is either making enough growth to catch up, or they're making enough growth to keep up, or we've got to push harder because they've got to make more growth to actually get equal growth to their students. We're going to be rolling out in August the growth model system, and parents will be able to, by September or October, get individual sheets on their kids and how they've been progressing on the state assessment over time. That's going to start to change conversations in this community, and I hope it's going to start to empower parents to actually sit down with their teacher, not to criticize their teacher, but to sit down and say, how are we going to do this together? Because ultimately, the schools are just a reflection of the community.
Right.
And if the schools are going to get better, they're only going to get better if the community embraces the schools and say, we're going to partner with you to help make them better.
Well, Superintendent, I'd like to thank you for your time.
You bet. My
really
pleasure.
Appreciate it, and hope to get you to come back on again, maybe not so difficult next time.
Well, I think it's your schedule was as busy as mine, Mike, but my schedule is pretty busy, so I would like to come back. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and any chance I get to talk about the Clark County School District and the partnership we want to have with this community, I'm sure willing to accept that opportunity.
Do you have any contact information, how they could get a hold of your office?
Yeah, I would just say go through the communications office, and what's difficult is, I had promised when I interviewed for this job that I'd be very visible in the community, so that's part of what the issue is. I spend a lot of time. I go to a lot of different meetings. I visit schools. I go to different organizations and groups. So sometimes it takes 3 weeks before I can get back, but I'd sure be willing to come back. Thank you for having me.
All right. That's Clark County Superintendent Dwight Jones. This is Steve Sampson, Jim Jonas. Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back with Dawn Gibbons, former Nevada Assemblywoman, a former First Lady, and actually she was also a candidate from Congressional District 2. This is Steve Sampson, Jim Jonas. We'll be right back.
Veterans in Politics takes a proactive approach to provide you, the veteran, with the political voice for which you fought and served.
Veterans in Politics is becoming the premier veteran organization of the 21st century, with political candidate interviews, insight, and endorsements.
Public speaking engagements in support of American values.
Radio shows to keep you updated on the latest in veteran and military support operations.
Providing job placement and business support.
Go to veteransinpolitics.com today and do your part in defending liberty.
Hey, listen up. If you're a military veteran, if you're related to a veteran, or if you know a veteran, you'll enjoy the Veterans Reporter radio show every Thursday from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. with me. I'm your host, Chuck N. Baker. Every week, we will explore veterans' issues and we'll have guests who will talk about topics of interest to and about the veterans community. And if you don't listen, you'll have to give me 20 push-ups.
While growing up, I've always asked my family, who is my father? I was told the name of a man. When I became older, I looked for this man and found him. He thought that I was his son as well, but after a DNA test, it was discovered that my family was lying to me all my life. I pressured my family to give me the real identity of my father. I then became suspicious and took my grandfather's DNA. After I buried my grandfather, 2 days later I discovered that my grandfather was in fact my biological father. I questioned myself and asked, what is my purpose on this earth? I should have never been conceived. But when I look at my 4 children, I knew that everything happens for a reason. This is Steve Sampson, find your identity.
Are you a business owner struggling during these economic times? Please listen up. How would you like to put your business and services in front of every resident and business in the Las Vegas Valley for less than a penny per home? Yes, that's right. I said less than 1 cent per home and business. And how would you like to have a dynamic and exciting online presence with the major search engines? How about an online video for your business and a fully optimized website with absolutely no setup fee? Hi, my name is George. If you are interested in these and other services that can make your phone ring with clients and prospects, then call me at 702-296-8394. Just call George at 702-296-8394. Thank you.
What are you doing online?
I'm checking out the belly dance class we took last week.
Where's it at?
TakeBackYourBelly.com.
That's right.
We worked our arms.
We worked our abs.
We worked so hard
and had a blast. No matter what your shape or size, come belly dance, you'll be surprised.
For class schedule and location, log on to TakeBackYourBelly.com or call 219-3151.
This is Jim Jonas asking you to listen to Veterans in Politics. Veterans in Politics is a weekly broadcast internet talk show hosted by myself, Jim Jonas, and Steve Sanson, president of Veterans in Politics Incorporated. That airs every Saturday from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. at www.vegasallnetradio.com. Veterans in Politics' sole purpose is to teach, educate, and inform veterans on issues and the candidates that will affect them. Too many politicians say they support veterans and their issues, but their actions tell a different story. Here at Veterans in Politics, we will expose these politicians by giving them a chance to come in and explain their actions to veterans so veterans can truly make informed decisions. Listen every Saturday to stay informed and to hold politicians accountable for their votes.
Well, we're back. This is Steve Sanson, Jim Jones for Veterans in Politics. We have live in studio Dawn Gibbons, former First Lady of Nevada, former candidate for Congressional District 2, and former Assemblywoman. Dawn, you have a lot of formers there. What are you doing with yourself?
Well, I'm sure you have a few formers yourself. Well, I'm at NBC. Obviously, okay. I've been in radio too. I had my own show at Fox News, but right now I'm at the NBC affiliates in Nevada. Okay. Director of Community and Public Relations, and their lobbyists.
Wow! Just give us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been in Nevada since 1974. Came here when I was 20 years old. You know, they say if a woman tells her age, they'll tell you everything. So here I am. About told you my age. I came from Atlanta, Georgia, with $500 and one suitcase and a lot of dreams and hopes of my own. And Nevada's been very good to me.
When you were a legislator, what did you hopes? What were your hopes to accomplish while you were there?
Well, I accomplished quite a bit. I started the Organ Donor and Tissue Task Force at the University of Nevada Medical School. I also, I've changed the Constitution twice. I don't think there's any legislator that's done that in their entire life.
How so? Because that's new to me.
Well, I did the Gibbons Tax Restraint Initiative. That was my constitutional amendment. I actually spent most of my retirement money on that. And I did the Education First Initiative. Jim was prohibited by law from doing that.
Wow.
Well, the Education First Initiative was pretty
I knew you were going to have something to say about that.
Well, no, I just want to I want for the listeners to explain how that came about, because from what I understand, it was after and correct me on the dates here, it was after the 2003 legislative process that got held up because Governor Gwen at the time proposed a tax increase somewhere around $600 million. And according to the Constitution, it takes 2/3 of the legislature to be able to do that.
That was my initiative.
That was your initiative.
Yes.
Very good on that, by the way. I completely agree with it. It's a great job. So basically, that legislative process just kept carrying on so long that they were afraid that the schools were not going to be able to open on time. So the Supreme Court then stepped in and said, okay, this time we'll allow a tax increase without the 2/3?
Yes, they said it would be a simple majority because we held up the education budget. And so I wanted to make sure, along with Jim, that that never happened to Nevada voters ever again. So we put education first so that they had to pass the K through 12 budget before they could consider any tax increases or any part of any budget.
Okay, very good. Because the big pushback that I got from some people was, it'll just be used. That initiative will be just used as another bargaining tool, and will just actually hold the legislative process up even longer. So the whole idea behind it is that before any tax increases, that was the key.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, and really that kept the integrity of the Gibbons Tax Restraint Initiative. Was the education first. Prevented people from playing those kind of games again, but it also kept the initiative process intact for the voters. It protected what they wanted.
Did that initiative pass? Is it law today?
Oh, yes, it's law.
Ms. Gibbons.
You can call me Dawn.
Dawn. When you were First Lady, what was your job description?
Well, there's no job description for first spouse. Actually, they create whatever they want. And of course, we have a working first spouse right now, Kathleen Sandoval. I had always been a businesswoman, owned my own businesses, and been a state legislator as well. So it was the first time I had not had a job of my own, but I did serve the people of the state of Nevada. I will tell you, I didn't get paid, but I worked harder than I ever have in my entire life. We did the initiative, Crystal Darkness, the anti-meth initiative, to make sure that their meth was eradicated from our schools, our communities, our city, and our state. But we also not only did that in Las Vegas and northern Nevada, we did it statewide, we did it nationwide and worldwide.
When Governor Gibbons was running for governor, and what made you want to run for Congressional District 2? Because some people were saying that maybe it was too much. You know, if he becomes governor, you can become the First Lady, and how are you going to?
Well, no one said that when he was running for Congress and I was living in Nevada with businesses, mind you. And no one said that when I was in the state assembly. I guess I had gotten to the 21st century and everybody was left behind, or those people that were asking the question.
That's a good comeback. I like that.
I will tell you, my comment was, from most people, is we really would vote for you, but we'd like to have you as our First Lady because we know you can get things done. And indeed I did. And I'm very proud of the work that we were able to accomplish. I mean, autism, NBC started Autism Speaks. I now work for NBC. We started the Autism Coalition of Nevada. No one knew what a catastrophe autism was in our nation. It was 1 in 150 when NBC started doing their ads. Now it's 1 in 101. So, and of course it's more so with boys. 1 in 91 children are autistic now. So we have to look at these things. We have to look at vaccinations, a lot of things. But there is no cure for autism. So certainly we need to find what's causing it, but we also need to look at what's the cure.
Right.
Are you planning to run for another public seat anytime soon?
I never say never, but right now I am so busy and so excited about my job with Channel 3 and, of course, the Channel 4 in Reno and Channel 10 in Elko. And I'm busy.
Three TV stations?
Yeah, yes.
How do you keep up with all that?
Well, I try to do my best.
And what's your main function on these TV stations?
I'm out in the community being their liaison, but also there's so many things that need to be done. And plus, I know so many people in the state that, a lot of times people tell me things that we need to cover. So I also was our lobbyist this legislative session, and there's a lot to do with a news station.
Okay, well, then I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
Then. What do you feel about raising the debt ceiling? And if they don't raise the debt ceiling, do you feel that Social Security and the veterans claim pay and the military pay is going to get cut?
I'm not running for politics. I'm working for a TV station, and I'm not a reporter, mind you. But I think ultimately they will have to raise the debt ceiling. I think all this is smoke and mirrors, but in the end they'll probably have to raise it because obviously we got to pay bills.
Do you think do you think there's a reason why that we've had? Because you're right. I mean, ultimately they're gonna raise it. They always do.
We all know that.
They've done it 10 times in the last decade, so about every year they're doing it now. What's your take on the whole Tea Party trying to hold Republicans accountable to actually being Republicans again and trying to draw down this deficit?
Well, I've been in the political arena for a long time, and I've seen ebbs and flows, and I think the Tea Party is really an important movement and a strong voice for our nation, because we have been spending too much, and we do need those people to come to the table and be active, and that's how we get change. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, they're way too far right," but then you have the left, and there's some people that are far left, but that's how you get change, because somewhere there's the middle ground that has to serve the public, and so I think their message is very important. Cut spending and live on what we have, which is very little right now.
Yeah, unfortunately.
We had Dwight Jones here today, the Clark County School Superintendent, and we were talking about the lack of teachers' pay. How do you feel about that?
Actually, that needs to be looked at. We can't really do anything now because we don't have enough money in our state, and we've suffered more than other states, of course. But why are we paying teachers so low and other people so high? I mean, you see people, big executives all over, our state that are making incredible amounts of money. There was a big article in the paper just a few days ago. I think it was last Sunday. How much some of them are making millions of dollars. But the people that make the most important contribution to our state, which are our teachers, they make very little. So I think it's something to look at.
I've always kind of liked the line that Dennis Miller uses. Lawyers and teachers should switch salaries, and let's see how that turns out for us.
Yeah, well, I have great admiration for our teachers.
One thing, too, that based on your experience in the legislature, one thing I found interesting is the mining companies here in Nevada. I was talking with a current state senator, I won't say her name on air, about how I'm not for raising taxes. But shouldn't we look at, or is the mining industry really paying their fair share of taxes?
Well, I think that was a study that they were proposing to do, and I did not follow it if it passed or not. But it's something that needs to be looked at, and I think mining did step up to the plate, especially under Jim Gibbons' administration, and they came forth and agreed to pay a tax ahead of time. So they get it. They know that they have to, in order to bring best quality people, that we have to have the best schools, because people do look at that. Yeah. So they have no interest in seeing our state do poorly. They have a lot of interest in seeing us do well.
Do you agree that we need a state tax here in Nevada? Maybe that might help.
Like an income tax?
No. Sorry. Strike that, Dawn.
Okay.
I'm talking about lottery. The state lottery.
Well, I voted for it.
No, because I don't want a state tax.
Yeah,
I
voted for it as a legislator in the state assembly.
Okay.
I kind of thought it was neat. I sort of liked the lottery, and buying the tickets, and I think a lot of people would enjoy doing that instead of sending our money over to California, have our friends buy our lottery tickets, right?
That's true. So do you also believe that we need another source of revenue here in the state instead of relying on gaming all the time?
Well, this is what's happened in Nevada. It's grown so much in a very short period of time. And, you're talking about the school district. Our school district down here in Clark County started in 1956. And, you compare that to Boston. Boston has 50,000 students, and I've forgotten how Nevada has almost 300,000 students. Boston's been around since the 1640s or something like that. I can't remember. It wasn't that great in my history, but let's say
that's relatively small. 50,000 students.
Yeah, and so look at that growth in just such a short time, really, and most of it's been in the last 10 years. We weren't prepared for it, and it's difficult, for people to understand just what's happened to our city, and it's basically down here in Las Vegas where the real concern is, because you need people in the hotels serving. I mean, we are a service community. So unless we change the way we do business, we may have to look at other revenue in the future because our schools are struggling.
So based on, because one of the things that, as far as bringing new revenue in, if we don't have a strong education base, then, because like you look at a Southern California and you go, well, why would a company want to move to Southern California? Because they have this huge corporate income tax and all this other stuff that they have to deal with. And one of the things that a lot of the companies say is, yeah, we have to go through all that, but they have a good educational system pool to draw from. You have the Stanfords, you have the USCs, you have the UCLAs. If you don't have that here, then how are we going to attract business, even if we just tell them, you know what, we'll pretty much pay you to come here, but if they can't have educated employees, they're not going to be able to make money.
Well, the more money that these people are going to be paid, the more educated they are normally, and they're going to want good schools for their kids. So you're right. That is a big attraction for people coming here.
Okay. Well, Dawn, could you give us your contact information? Or do you have a website or anything like that?
Well, I do. I have a website, dawngibbons.org or dawngibbons.com. I also have a Facebook, but I think I'm at the maximum, almost 5,000 friends. I'm going to have to delete some of those people outside of Nevada.
Some of them not really your friends. They just
well, I think anybody that's in Nevada, they're my friends. So I got to go and see who's out of. I got to go through that 5,000 list so I can add some more Nevada friends.
Well, don't delete me because I'm a friend of yours on Facebook.
Oh, perfect.
Well, we'd like to thank you for coming on the show.
Well, it was my honor to be here, and I really support the veterans. My son is in the Navy. He's a Navy flight aviator, and
really?
So I'm very proud and honored.
I didn't even know
here.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time, Dawn.
You're welcome.
This is Steve Sampson, Jim Jonas, and folks, just want to remind everybody, next week we have Helmut Lehman, who's an independent candidate for Nevada Congressional District 2, and we have Jack Maine. Well, he was the Democratic candidate for Nevada District 2. He's also going to be on our program next week as well. This is Steve Sampson and Jim Jonas for Veterans in Politics. That was Dawn Gibbons, former First Lady of Nevada and former Assemblywoman for a great state of Nevada. This is until next week.